Hey, good evening. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Gadi Schwartz coming to you from Los Angeles. And here are the stories we're watching tonight, starting with all of that damage from Idalia. The storm ripping through the South, leaving some people with absolutely nothing.
It's a little bit of disbelief, depression. So you go up, when we walked up and we saw that one of our cottages, the building is completely gone.
And there are so many artifacts just sitting at the bottom of the ocean from the Titanic. So why is the federal government now trying to stop researchers from getting their hands on some of those pieces?
Are we actually learning anything new about it? And is that the reason to recover artifacts? Or should we just leave it alone?
And would you give your fingerprints or an eye scan to use social media? Elon Musk is taking a page out of Apple's playbook. Does it go too far?
Security scan approved.
And as the remnants of Idalia spread out, in a lot of places, the damage left behind is staggering, especially along that big bend of Florida's coast. That right there is what Horseshoe Beach looks like today. People still in shock after seeing what happened to their homes.
I just can't believe. Wow. Unbelievable.
Now, I want to show you this video that's out there that perfectly captures the damage that comes with storm surge. This is home security footage. It shows one house getting completely destroyed in under an hour. This is at 8 o'clock yesterday morning. Fast forward a little bit, you can see the water sloshing all around, rocking that home to its core. And then about 8:50, the house is practically underwater with large parts completely swept away. And while early reports show that Idalia could have been a lot worse for major cities, for a small town like Perry, Florida, the devastation is unbelievable.
I've lived here this long and have never seen it this bad, and we weren't prepared to lose all of this. We're just a small, quiet town, hardly anything ever happens, and now all of this, and you're just trying to stay alive.
And NBC's Tom Yamas has been anchoring from Horseshoe Beach, Florida. Tom, this is the first full day of cleanup, right? How's it going out there?
Yeah, it's kind of wild. I mean, we were at Steenhatchee, which is also a coastal community about 30 minutes from where we are right now in Horseshoe Beach, and we met a business owner there, and him and his friends, his employees, his family, they were all cleaning up their business. It's a marina resort. They have a bar. They have a bait shop. They have pretty much everything you need on the water if you're fishing or you want to have a good time, and they got completely inundated with the ocean. It literally came into their property. Here's what he told me about how high the water was. How high was the water here?
To the top of the stage. So just under 11 feet.
Water was all the way up there? Oh, yeah. So the water line is this right here?
Right here, where the little debris and trash is on the wall.
Yeah.
You can look over here at the windows and see the stained glass redfish, see that water line right under it.
Is that like this dock?
And there's still some seawater in here, huh?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you
everywhere.
see this over here?
You have the dock.
Still got some water. So, Gadi, you have two business owners there. That second business owner, her restaurant, everything inside has to be replaced, top down, so complete loss. They are insured. They've been there for a long time. She says in other storms that they've seen damage, but nothing like what they saw with Idalia. Again, look, these are small communities. They're not highly populated, but there's a lot of damage, right, Gadi? And these people are suffering, and they want to make sure that they're not forgotten. They want to make sure they get the help they need, whether it be through insurance or the federal government or county resources, because there's a lot of cleaning up to do right now. I mean, you can see just behind me here, Gadi, this here in Horseshoe Beach, there's a ton of damage here. As far as the eye can see, everything is damaged unless your house was built on stilts. And you can see there's a vehicle, a pickup truck that's actually in the canal, pushed in there by either the storm surge or the wind.
And Tom, that woman that you spoke to, it sounds like she was insured. Is she the exception, or do most people have insurance there?
You know, it's a good question, Gadi. I mean, we talked to a lot of homeowners here in Horseshoe Beach. The insurance is so expensive because you're living on the water. And if you're in a one-story home, which a lot of the older homes are, to get insurance on that is incredibly pricey if you can even find it. So a lot of people here, they don't have insurance. And because they don't have insurance, they've lost their vacation homes. And again, this is not a, we're not talking about, Cannes here. This is not the Amalfi Coast here. I mean, this is, middle class, upper middle class people, working class people who like to come out here. They work on the water, or this is their second home near somewhere here in this community in Florida, and they like to relax here and fish and spend time with their families here. And so they roll the dice. And for some people, they were telling us, listen, we haven't had insurance for decades, and it's been okay, but now they've lost their property. They're probably going to park, trailers or build some other type of structure. What's interesting about here, and you can't see it in this shot, but we have lots of video of it, is that a lot of the homes are built on stilts. But Gadi, it's unlike anything I've ever seen before. I mean, I've seen homes on stilts in Biloxi. We're talking about 10 feet. Here, they're 20 feet. So they're literally homes in the sky, and a giant crane just picks up the home and puts it on those stilts, and it's the only way to protect it.
Wow. Tom, yesterday you told this story. I keep thinking about it. This dad who you met that grabbed his family, was huddled over them as this tree came crashing down on their house.
Yeah.
What struck you the most about what you've seen today?
We spoke to this woman, Renee Jacobs, and her family has lived here, had their home here for 30 years. It's a one-story home, was built in 1950. And I asked her, what are the greatest memories you have of this home? And she said, I used to love putting the kids to bed, and I would play the piano. And it was so quiet here because it's such a small community, and the piano would put them to bed. And it was such a beautiful sort of image. And we were talking to her, Gadi, in her house that was completely destroyed. Here's what she told me. If you have one great memory, your favorite memory of the house, what are you going to think about?
Oh, gosh. I would put my children to bed, and I had a piano in here, and I would play the piano, and they would go to sleep. And that's probably the best time. Everything was quiet, no noise on the street, no anything, just us, just family.
Just us, just family. That's definitely going to stay with me, Gadi. And that's the sentiment around here. A lot of people very close. Neighbors are helping each other out. They're coming here arm in arm. They're talking to us. Everyone is incredibly pleasant. What they need, though, they need water. They just got portalets because there's obviously no running water here. There's no electricity. They need food. Grills have been coming in from the Red Cross. A commissioner just came by and said they just brought 2 large tanks full of gas. So if people need to fill up, they have that there. So little by little, FEMA's not here yet, but little by little help's coming in. The problem is last night they had reports of people that were looting near a business. So now they've set a curfew up. So they're dealing with that also. So it's a headache for everyone here. But I'm actually surprised that people, they're obviously, incredibly emotional because of what's happened, but they're still so polite. Gadi?
Hey, yeah, seeing that woman with the Mama Bear shirt there, just praying that she gets a piano once again. Tom Yamas, thanks so much for that powerful reporting, brother. And let's check in on another hard-hit area, Cedar Key, Florida. This is when Idalia hit on the left, and on the right, that's when the storm left behind a trail of destruction. NBC's Guad Venegas joins us from there now. Guad, how's Cedar Key doing today?
Gadi, you can see some of the trash that was left behind. We're on one of the beaches right in front of the buildings that were severely damaged, and it's just surreal. There's a microwave right here on the beach, pieces of drywall, and if I walk closer to the water, this is all full of trash under the water. There's beams, there's drywall. Over on the other side, there's a small pier, well, what used to be a pier that belonged to the man that lives in this house. He told me he actually built that, and he expects to spend $150,000 just on the wood to replace that deck. And, that's just one small thing. The destruction continues all across this neighborhood. This building behind me is one of the buildings that was covered by that storm surge. So a lot of trash, debris that came from the buildings, and also stuff that just came from the water, from the trees. It's all mixed in. You can smell the humidity and also the trash that has been building up today. The sun's about to set, so the temperature did drop a little bit, but it was a hot day with a lot of neighbors and also workers that were here all day trying to restore the power for the buildings that are still affected. So this is just an example of the destruction that was left behind, Gadi.
And Gad, looking behind you and seeing those houses still standing, that's kind of a sigh of relief. But how much water got into those houses, and what do those houses look like on the inside right now?
So let's walk over to this building. This is a Fairway Inn. It's a hotel that has little cottages that sit right in front of the ocean. This used to be one of those cottages. The owner told me that was the favorite one because it had an ocean view, the view of the beautiful water we have over here. And as you can see, it's no longer standing. This is a television that was inside one of the cottages, and it was washed out. This building, Gadi, got my attention because it's made out of cinder blocks. So these walls were cinder block walls that were torn apart when the surge came in. And this is what's left behind. The one behind me over there has a torn out wall. And these cottages, Gadi, if you look at them from the outside, it looks like they made it out okay, like they weren't as damaged, but the inside is completely destroyed. Here's part of a conversation that I had with the owner about all of this destruction.
Well, as we walk around, we just keep thinking like, oh, we just painted this cottage. Oh, we just, in the pavilion, we just put the new ceiling fans up. We have one cottage left to paint. All 11 units are painted. It doesn't matter now. The furniture, the beds, all the beds are ruined. The dressers and I mean, just little stuff like that.
And Gadi, let me show you what she's talking about. She says the furniture is ruined, the beds are ruined. Well, let's just take a peek right here. This is what it looks like inside of these cottages. Again, from the outside, it looks like it's okay, but look at the inside. The walls were torn apart. We have a mattress left. I mean, it's completely destroyed. And some of the items that are outside on the beach, the microwave, the TVs, and the chairs, a lot of them came from inside of these cottages, Gadi.
Everyone always thinks that hurricanes and winds are the most destructive force, and right there you see the power of a storm surge. Gad Venegas, incredible images. Thanks so much for showing us that. So where does Idalia go from here? This is just the start of hurricane season. We still have a ways to go. Bill Cairns is wrapping up our storm coverage with that forecast. Hey there, Bill.
Gadi, all these pictures of the damage up and down the coastline of Florida and even along the southeast coast. You know, that's what happens when you get a major hurricane. It's just so many water issues and wind problems, and you can just see how long the recovery is going to take. And our hearts just go out for so many of these small communities that got nailed by this storm. So we're almost done. Just a couple windy spots left, and the rain is exiting the coast. And hopefully, fingers crossed, we'll never have to deal with Idalia again. So still windy, we'll call it gusty by the standards out here on the Outer Banks. It's been a rough day. The surf's been up early in the morning. The high tide was way up. Had some overwash on Highway 12. But things are improving. And all that heavy rain that fell in North Carolina, too, some areas up to 6 to 8 inches. All the rivers are starting to crest and come down, too. So that'll be better. And the other thing that we learned from the Hurricane Center, it's no longer considered a tropical anymore. There's no real thunderstorms with it. So now it's being called post-tropical Idalia, and it's about 165 miles off of Cape Hatteras, but it still has strong winds, 65-mile-per-hour winds. Now it's what we consider almost like a strong ocean storm. And as long as it stays off the coast in the ocean, that's just fine. So let's track this, and as you notice, the Hurricane Center brings it pretty much due east, almost towards Bermuda. We're going to be tracking this storm for a while, and they actually think it's going to go, Idalia is going to eventually go over warm enough water again to get some thunderstorms and be reclassified as a tropical storm again by the time we get to Saturday or possibly Sunday. It'll be near Bermuda at that time, so obviously if people on the island there or anyone taking any cruises, that'll be an issue for you to have to deal with. And then the storm turns northwards a little bit, and then finally, hopefully, it should fall apart. What's interesting is that some of our long-range computer models, with whatever's left of Idalia, actually do bend it back and try to drift it here, either towards New England or Nova Scotia or Maine. We'll see if that happens or not. That's like 7 days from now. And then, if anything, it wouldn't really get to become a big, strong, powerful storm anyways. So this is that time of year. This is literally the peak of the hurricane season. Everyone wants to know what's next. Well, Franklin is leaving and exiting. Jose is going to get swallowed up by Franklin. This is probably the next storm to watch coming off the coast of Africa, but this is even 7 to 10 days away from Puerto Rico. So we got a long ways. We get a little bit of break here after dealing with Idalia. And as far as other things go, everyone's wondering about the weekend outlook. outlook and the Labor Day holiday, the heat's going to return in a big way and be a big story here. So September beauty is going to be setting up in areas of the Northeast, especially Saturday. But the middle of the country is going to get really hot. We're looking at 100s here in areas like Wichita. Look at Dallas, 101, 98 in areas around Minneapolis on Sunday. And then by the time we get to Monday, it's going to be record heat possible in areas like New York City, Washington, D.C. A very hot Labor Day. You're going to want to get to the water, Gadi, everywhere in the east. We will deal with a little bit of rain in the northern plains, but no tropics, no severe storms. Just that heat thing just won't go away, Gadi. It's returning with a vengeance this holiday weekend.
And some breaking news tonight out of Austin, Texas. At least 2 people are dead and 1 hurt after a shooting there. Police are saying it happened just after 5 p.m. at a business called the Arboretum in northwest Austin. Take a look at what people are saying there.
It's just scary to know that, we were just a couple of businesses away from where this happened. And, I'm doing my everyday normal errands and grocery shopping, buying dinner for my family, and all of a sudden I get a text saying that there's a shooter down the street.
And officials are still investigating the shooting, but we're going to bring you more updates as soon as we get them. And still to come tonight, a new legal battle more than 2 miles below the ocean. It's all about exactly who gets to go visit the Titanic wreckage and who gets to bring back artifacts. And this record-breaking packed stadium in Nebraska, well, it is putting women's sports at the center of attention, and we're going to explain all that in just a bit, so stay tuned. Hey there, welcome back. And here are some of the other headlines we're watching tonight. Former President Donald Trump pled not guilty today in the Georgia election interference case. Now, his lawyers also told the court he's not going to appear in person for the scheduled arraignment next week, which is allowed under Georgia law. And a Proud Boys leader was sentenced to 17 years in federal prison today, making it one of the largest sentences ever given after the Capitol attack. Now, Joe Biggs was convicted of seditious conspiracy. The longest sentence handed out so far after the Capitol riot is 18 years to Oath Keepers founder Stuart Rhodes. And earlier this week, a 200-year-old West Point time capsule was opened, and at first it looked like it was empty, but that is what they found buried under a bunch of muck, coins dating back to the 1700s. And rapper 50 Cent threw a broken microphone into a crowd during a concert in Los Angeles and allegedly hit a fan. Now, video shows him hurling that mic, which hit a woman in the head. She filed a police report claiming he looked directly at her. And in a statement, the rapper's lawyer said he would never intentionally strike anyone. And let's take a quick moment to bow down to the University of Nebraska's women's volleyball team. Against all odds, they got 92,000 fans to pack that massive school stadium last night for volleyball day there. And in doing so, they broke the world record for the largest attendance ever at a women's sporting event. 92,000. And yes, the home field advantage definitely helped the team crushing Omaha to a thunderous applause. Look at that sea of red. And now to the hunt for a longtime serial sexual predator spanning from the West Coast all the way to New York. The case finally getting a huge break with the arrest of a 35-year-old suspect taken into custody in New York for attacks that happened in Sacramento, California. Now, police departments in both cities, along with the FBI, have been tracking that suspect, and he's now being extradited to Sacramento. NBC's Dana Griffith joins us now with more. Dana, it looks like so far police are not saying much about these crimes, but these crimes, they are saying date back to 2010. What do we know?
Yeah, so we know this 35-year-old Kabe Cummings was arrested Tuesday in a joint effort involving not only the NYPD, but also the FBI. So they aren't giving much details about what happened, but we hope to learn that pretty soon. According to police, these sexual assaults occurred back in 2010, some 13 years ago. And according to our Sacramento affiliate, KCRA, they say that Cummings worked for the city's START program. That's an after-school program for kids. It's unclear if any of these charges stem from his work with that program, but they also say that he may have had a similar role in New York. Now, it's unclear, if there's any connection there. But again, according to KCRA, there are 3 victims in the Sacramento area. And officials say Cummings will be extradited back to Sacramento, likely tomorrow.
Do we know at this point how he was caught? Was it tips, possible DNA? Any word on what led them to him?
That's the big question. We don't know, but it's questionable. They use the term serial sexual predator. When you think about that, it may have something to do with luring people. I mean, just looking at the charges, they are so heinous. Officials have not given us exact details of these alleged crimes, but they include kidnapping, forcible rape, sodomy of an unconscious victim. So if these are true, it's very disturbing. And you've got potentially 3 victims in Sacramento. It makes you wonder, were they looking at him for other potential cases? There is now a tip line. They are asking people if you have any information about Cummings to come forward. There is going to be a press conference next Tuesday in Sacramento at the DA's office. So we hope to learn new details about what happened and how this person may have been connected to these victims.
It's absolutely disturbing. Hoping for more details on Tuesday. Thanks so much, Dana.
You're welcome.
And turning now to the son of convicted killer Alec Murdaugh, Buster Murdaugh, who is now speaking out, defending his father, who was found guilty of killing his family in that infamous trial earlier this year, all while he's also making headlines. Here's Stephanie Gosk.
This is not what I needed.
In his first on-camera interview since his mother and brother were killed on their family estate in South Carolina, Buster Murdaugh defends himself and his father, Alec, who is serving a life sentence for the double murder, speaking with Fox Nation.
You think it was a crappy motive, and yet 12 jurors all agreed that your dad killed your mom and Paul.
That's right.
What do you think about that?
I do not believe it was fair.
Questions have swirled around Buster over a different death. Former classmate Stephen Smith, a 19-year-old whose body was discovered in 2015 on a road about 15 miles from the family property, where years later Maggie and Paul Murdaugh were shot and killed. Initially ruled a hit and run, the case was reopened in the weeks after the double murder, and state law enforcement is now investigating Smith's death as a homicide. There were unsubstantiated rumors that he and Buster Murdaugh were in a relationship. Murdaugh has never been identified as a suspect and does not face any criminal charges.
I never had anything to do with his murder, and I never had anything to do with him on a physical level of any regard.
Murdaugh was at his father's trial every day, taking the stand in his defense. But this was his response in the interview when asked if he thinks his father is a psychopath.
I'm not prepared to sit here and say that it encompasses him as a whole, but certainly I think there are characteristics where you look at the manipulation and the lies and the carrying out of that such, and I think that's a fair assessment.
Such a wild story. Stephanie Gosk, thanks so much. Now, dishes, perfume vials, and even a lunch menu. Artifacts from the Titanic have been pulled up deep from the bottom of the ocean, but now the U.S. government is trying to stop those kinds of expeditions. NBC's Tom Costello explains.
Yeah, good day. This is not related to the tragedy in June that took the lives of 5 Titanic tourists. A Georgia company has the salvage rights to Titanic, but U.S. law and international agreements really limit activity around that site. And now the government has gone to court to stop the company from returning to retrieve a key relic, the wireless that transmitted Titanic's call for help. For 111 years, Titanic has rested some 12,500 feet down on the ocean floor. Its maiden voyage from England to New York captured on film. The terror of hitting an iceberg in the dead of night portrayed in blockbuster movies.
In an hour or so, all this will be at the bottom of the Atlantic.
Among the artifacts already recovered, shoes, silverware, fine china. But now the U.S. government is moving to block the company with the salvage rights, RMS Titanic, from recovering even more, including the ship's wireless telegraph that transmitted the SOS to passing ships. In a court filing, RMS Titanic says it hopes to return next year and may recover freestanding objects inside the wreck, including objects from inside the Marconi room, the radio room. Under U.S. law and international agreements, the wreckage is now a memorial and cannot be disturbed. The government insists the company is not free to disregard this validly enacted federal law, yet that is its stated intent.
The company's
reason to be is they do all of the exhibits that have the actual artifacts from the Titanic.
David Gallo is a strategic advisor to RMS Titanic. We talked to him in June before the government's challenge.
The rules are there can be no more recovery of artifacts.
In 1996, Titanic survivor Edith Hazeman told us of the night she lost her father.
I never forget it. See all the dead bodies floating in the sea. It was terrible.
Since 1985, roughly 250 people have visited Titanic. Then, in June, tragedy. 5 people died when their submersible imploded.
It is a grave site. 1,500 people died there.
Researcher Katie Croft-Bell has dived to the site herself. Even as time and the ocean's depths take their toll on the wreckage, she now thinks it should be treated with the reverence of a cemetery.
Are we actually learning anything new about it? And is that the reason to recover artifacts? Or should we just leave it alone? We have a lot of things already. Let's just call it a day and leave it with respect.
We reached out to the company, RMS Titanic, for comment. We got no response. No response from NOAA, the government agency moving to block this latest move to recover the artifacts. But consider this. Many historians say there are parallels here to cemeteries at Gettysburg, at Normandy, and yet the sea is slowly taking away, rusting away at Titanic. So is this hallowed ground never to be touched, or should they try to take the artifacts now while they can and preserve them for all time? Back to you.
Fascinating question, Tom. Thanks so much. And coming up, an update on the recovery in Maui, which now includes Hawaii's incarcerated. Could their DNA help identify those lost? But first, you got to see this. This driver was pulled over for the heavy load he was carrying. Cops in Nebraska responded to calls about a car driving a cow down the highway. And actually, he's not a cow, he's a bull, and his name is Howdy Doody. And he was riding like he usually does in the passenger seat when the cops carried out that routine traffic stop. The driver was left with a warning after he promised to take Howdy Doody home, back at the ranch, and without that, they got moving again, but they promised to also lay off the horn. Just kidding. We'll be right back. Hey there, welcome back. And here are some of the stories here on the West Coast that we're watching right now. A family YouTuber in Utah has been arrested on child abuse charges. Ruby Frank is behind the YouTube channel 8 Passengers, and she's known for her strict parenting. On Wednesday, officials responded to reports of a malnourished child who was duct taped, and they found 2 kids in those conditions who they took to the hospital for treatment. Frankie and her business partner were arrested on charges of child abuse and are still in police custody. And extreme heat might be behind the death of a 12-year-old boy in Riverside County, California. Family members say Yosha Robinson complained to a teacher during a gym class that he couldn't breathe. His family also says he was forced to run in 90-degree heat after not dressing appropriately for class. Robinson passed out and was later pronounced dead at a nearby hospital. The Lake Elsinore Unified School District says they could not give specific details on the child's death. And if you live in San Diego, you might see some fuzzy little critters who are out on the lookout for love, apparently. We're talking about tarantulas. The city's park department says male tarantulas come out of their burrows around this time of year to find a mate, but say, don't worry. Park officials say they are not harmful to humans, and if you see one, just leave them alone. It's hard enough to find a date out there on the web, so cut them loose. And turning now to the latest in Maui, the island is on fire watch again with dry conditions and high winds in the forecast. And this comes as Maui is working to rebuild. The road to recovery now includes some help from Oprah and Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, who are teaming up to launch a $10 million relief fund. Take a listen.
Oprah lives here in Maui. I was raised in these islands. My family are buried in these islands. It's going to take a long time to rebuild. Probably get a little worse before it gets a little better, but we're here doing what we could do.
And President Biden has also pledged $95 million to rebuild infrastructure and harden Hawaii's electric grid. Relief is pouring in for Maui in all kinds of ways. Prison inmates are being offered a chance to help identify more victims by using their DNA samples. Lynn Kawano with our NBC affiliate in Hawaii has that story.
Scores missing or killed in the Lahaina Inferno have not yet been identified. The Family Assistance Center in West Maui offers relatives a chance to provide DNA to help with identification. And the same will soon be offered to all those behind bars.
Those that want to voluntarily provide the DNA, we would take the swab, the oral swab, and mail it in to the address provided, and then it would be processed that way.
All the facilities are included, including Saguaro Correctional Center in Arizona, where thousands of Hawaii inmates reside. Even though prisoners convicted of felony crimes have been contributing DNA samples, DPS says that database is separate from the one being used to identify fire victims.
And I would think people would want to know if their family and loved ones are affected at all. So the wardens are querying the staff now and the inmates to find out. And once they provide me with that list, then we will begin the process of collecting that DNA.
Lynn Kawano, thanks so much. Now to some in-depth reporting out of Mississippi, where the public defender system is facing a crisis. Legal experts say the system is underfunded and is failing to provide representation to those who cannot afford their own counsel. Everyone is entitled to that under the Sixth Amendment, but in some cases, people spend months, even years behind bars waiting for a lawyer. And NBC's Aaron Gilchrist spoke to one such person, and here's his story.
Dwayne Lake spent 6 years in a Mississippi jail accused of triple murder, and all that time was before he went to trial and was found not guilty.
In Mississippi, you're definitely guilty until you prove yourself innocent.
Lake says he had to wait to be formally indicted for years before getting what the Constitution guarantees, a court-appointed defense attorney dedicated to his case.
I'm not even in the court system. I'm just being held by the sheriff department on the allegations.
For 2 years?
For 2 years, I'm basically sitting in jail without legal representation, no attorney to help me, no pretrial motions, no pre-indictment motions, none of those things.
Lake fell into what the legal community has called the dead zone, the time between arrest and indictment for people who can't afford their own lawyer. It's a problem rooted in Mississippi's multi-tier public defense crisis. Today, there are about 32 full-time public defenders across all of the state's 82 counties.
We need 130 to 135 full-time equivalent attorneys, and half of those should be full-time lawyers.
Andre Degree runs the Mississippi State Public Defender Office. He says the part-time lawyers hired by local courts, who often still have their own private practices, are simply overwhelmed.
In most places, they have way more cases than they could reasonably handle, and then they have no support staff.
Outside of death penalty and appeals cases, the state of Mississippi is one of only 5 that do not fund a defense for people who can't afford their own lawyers. Here, individual counties bear the burden of funding and running their own programs. Degree says it's a responsibility the state should be taking on.
I don't think the problem is ever going to be solved until we get state general funds to even that out.
Manpower and money aren't the only challenges for a state where 85% of those charged with felonies can't afford a lawyer, according to the MacArthur Justice Center at the University of Mississippi.
I suspect that Mississippi has the least effective and the least robust public defender system in America.
Cliff Johnson runs the MacArthur Center and told me there are no rules to force the wheels of justice to turn quickly for people who are accused but not yet charged.
In some of these counties, you only have a grand jury twice a year. So if the grand jury comes up and the officer who worked your case is at Dollywood on vacation with his family and they bump you over to the next grand jury, you just got 6 months more in jail.
Johnson would like to see limits on how long a district attorney can hold someone without bringing formal charges. Right now, there are none.
You don't have a lawyer, you don't have money to get out on bail, you don't have anybody fighting for you, and you don't have judges who are willing to look at the DA and say, I'm not going to hold this guy for 6 months, a year and a half, while you get your stuff together to go to the grand jury.
Local and state prosecutors didn't respond to our request for comment, but this year, the state public defender and other advocates helped secure new regulations from the Mississippi Supreme Court. They mandate that initial appearance defenders stay with clients through the dead zone. It's a small step forward.
It's a really important question for all of us. Are we committed to the system of justice we say we believe in?
Now at 37, Dwayne Lake, finally a free man, moved out of the state, slowly rebuilding his life in Louisville, Kentucky, and working to reconnect with his 3 young kids.
You decided you just couldn't stay in Mississippi?
I couldn't. I feel as if, especially now, it's a target on my back. I'm still focused, trying to get back in my kids' life. You know, I mean, I'm not where I want to be at, but I'm working towards it.
And Aaron Gilchrist joins us now. Aaron, I mean, just to recap, he was in jail for 2 years, but not in the justice system. That's what he said, right? He basically was not recognized by the court. How often is this kind of thing happening?
It's happening quite a bit in Mississippi, simply because there's no mandate that a lawyer be immediately assigned as soon as somebody is in trouble with the law. And so since there's no mandate for that, you can have, as was the case for Dwayne, you can have instances where people will sit, if they're lucky, for days or weeks. If they're not, months or years, waiting just to get that initial committed public defender.
Wow. And we heard that they need hundreds of public defenders, hundreds of lawyers. Do we have any idea of how many people are in this type of situation right now?
You know, we asked that question to the state public defender, and he said no. He doesn't really know how many people are in this situation, simply because everything is disconnected. The court system there doesn't have any statewide oversight, and so it's hard, he says, for his office to really have an accurate count of how many people are waiting in a jail in one of those 82 counties across Mississippi.
Are there any efforts being made to put an end to this?
So the state public defender has been trying. He told us for the last 12 years he has presented plans to the state legislature, and they've gone nowhere. Plans that would have made the state a statewide system for the public defense system there. Back in 1998, there was a statewide public defender law that was passed. 2 years later, it was repealed, and while it was actually enforced, it was never actually funded. And so it's going to take, Cliff Johnson from the MacArthur Center told us, the effort of regular folks, neighbors, legislators, judges, state leaders to come up with the money to to create and fund a statewide system in order for people to really experience liberty, he says, in the state of Mississippi.
Aaron Gilchrist, incredible reporting. Thanks so much, buddy.
Thanks.
And coming up, the latest nuclear drill test out of North Korea, and then the rising death toll after a fire in Johannesburg, why some people were forced to throw their kids from windows down to safety.
I didn't feel well, you know, because I'm still alive, but also me, I just fall from the fourth tree until down.
Hey there, welcome back. Let's take a quick look around the world in 80 seconds. The Biden administration warned that an arms negotiation between North Korea and Russia is actively advancing. Now, that deal would supply Russia with significant ammunition to use in its fight against Ukraine. And speaking of North Korea, state media there is reporting that they simulated a scorched earth nuclear strike on targets across South Korea. Now, it came hours after the U.S. deployed bombers for air drills, which North Korea said amounted to plans for a preemptive nuclear attack. In Gabon, Africa, military leaders staged a coup and appeared to seize power from the country's president there. Men in uniform announced the president's house arrest on national television, as you're seeing right there, and the president himself released this video message.
To make noise for the people here have arrested me and my family. My son is somewhere, my wife is in another place, and I'm at the residence.
In Haiti, the U.S. Embassy is urging Americans to leave as soon as possible. Gang violence is on the rise, and just this summer, an American nurse and her daughter were kidnapped and held for ransom for 2 weeks. And in Johannesburg, South Africa, over 70 people are dead and another 50 are hurt. And that's all after a fire engulfed a 5-story building in the city's central business district. And many of the people living in that building were homeless. Our colleague Yosera Elber here at Sky News reports.
A growing crowd is held back. And just beyond their view, blocked by a fire truck, the bodies are laid out.
Bodies piled up, and one as young as 1 year old. This is a tragedy today in Johannesburg, and you can see family members standing around the bodies waiting to identify them.
All around us, residents look on, hopeless and scared, surrounded by crumbling buildings with broken glass and rotting walls. A warning for the disaster that has now come.
And I heard the screamings and all of the people screaming, children and shit. Because these children's living there on top. So when I woke up, I saw people running around. Already the fire was not easy to stop. So me too, I wanted to take cover. I woke up my friend.
Do you have people in there that are missing? Do you know who's
Yeah, 2 of my friends.
The fire started at around 1 a.m. While some residents died from smoke inhalation, others were killed and injured from trying to jump to safety. The building is actually a heritage site, marked with a blue plaque. Once an administrative center during the apartheid era, now an informal settlement and abandoned by the city council.
Sir, has there been neglect here?
There's been neglect across the board in the city of Johannesburg.
The CBD, has it not been particularly neglected?
The CBD, there has been neglect for the longest of time. But we also have to take into consideration that this is a historical challenge that exists.
It's a wake-up call for us to begin to address the situation of housing in the inner city.
The challenge may be historic, but so too is this tragedy. Veteran firemen and longtime emergency responders have told us that this is South Africa's most fatal building fire to date. A disaster that has long been threatening Johannesburg's inner city and has finally struck its most vulnerable. Yusra Al-Bagir, Sky News, Johannesburg.
And before we go, it is time for the future of everything. Some of us use our fingerprints to unlock our phones. Some of us scan our faces. But would you give up your biometric data to use social media? Jake Ward joins us for that chat coming up next. And now for the future of everything. Tonight we are talking biometric, something Hollywood has been imagining for all of us for decades.
Identify for retina scan.
Kirk, Admiral James T.
Security scan approved.
Edna mode. And guess.
This is one of those weird times when you think of a word like biometrics and you maybe kind of shudder and you think, oh no, that's that creepy future stuff. But the truth is, creepy or not, biometrics is already a huge part of our daily life, whether companies say so out loud or not. From everything like our phones to airports to our homes and cars, even some stores when you're out shopping, companies are using unique human features to identify people and ultimately profit. Apple's had Face ID fingerprint scan for quite some time. Amazon's letting people scan their palms to make payments in stores. Microsoft and Google have been using facial recognition as well. And those are just some of the examples that we know about, right? So now enter X, formerly known as Twitter. The company is making headlines for changing its privacy policy surrounding biometrics. And starting next month, X users who pay premium will have the option to let the app take fingerprints, eye scans, and palm prints. But why? Jake Ward is here to give us all of those answers. Howdy, Jake. So what is the play? We know that the goal of Musk with X is to make it an everything app, kind of like WeChat in China. So how does biometrics play in?
Well, it may be, Gadi, that what we're probably seeing here is part of this push by Elon Musk and his new CEO, Linda Yaccarino, to try and turn Twitter X into this broader play, right? And that's why these new policies that go into effect at the end of September pull in not just permission to collect biometric data, but also things like your education and employment background. They say that they're going to be able to offer you possible employment offers, competing with LinkedIn. So it could be part of this plan to make it an audio, video, banking, job search platform in this bigger picture. But what's probably happening specifically with the biometrics is that they're supposedly trying to set themselves up legally to be allowed to ask you for this stuff so that they can identify you through it. I mean, all companies like this are in the business of trying to identify who you are, infer who you are, even when you're trying to stay anonymous on the platform. And there's also a big move across these tech companies. This includes Apple and Google and others who've all been playing around with the idea of a pass key as opposed to a password. So instead of something you would type in, it would instead be something like how you type it in, or how your face looks, or the sound of your voice, or your retina, or any of these other sort of dystopian things that we've thought about. That could be part of what's coming up in the future. But of course, all of this comes with a great deal of controversy, Gadi.
Yeah, a great deal of controversy. And it's funny because you start talking biometrics, it's just one of those automatic, like, no, this is an invasion of my privacy. And then you start hearing, wait, maybe I won't have to be bothered by a password and changing my password all the times. Like, it seems like kind of a weird trade-off there, but it's something that's already baked into so much of the tech that we use, right?
Well, that's absolutely right. And it's really interesting what you bring up, right? Because I think we're at this moment where we as a society, certainly we as a nation, are trying to negotiate this balance between the incredible convenience of technology and the super creepy sophistication of the tracking that comes with it, right? I remember talking to a top executive at one of the major social media platforms, and he described to me how the number one and number two requests from people in his company or customers of the company was, A, I want you to not track me. B, I want much more targeted and relevant ads. I don't want ads that aren't relevant to me. And those two things are diametrically opposed, right? Like, if you want them to know enough about you to really hit you with ads you'll enjoy, you're going to be giving up a huge amount of information about yourself. So I think we're really navigating our way through this stuff. But you're right. I mean, we're coming up on a world in which it could be this seamless thing where just picking up the phone somehow gives them the information they need to identify that you are really you. But of course, Twitter has bumped into this, before and had problems with it. Back in June, a proposed class action lawsuit went through, accusing them of being in violation of really the only law around that prohibits this kind of thing. That's the Illinois Biometric Information Privacy Act. They're the only ones, really. Illinois is one of the only regions that even has any laws about this. Federally, there are no laws about privacy online. And so, the question is going to be, do they run afoul, perhaps, of, their own terms of service, which in the past have said you can't collect biometric data? And if so, does the FTC get involved? Elon Musk has a way of kind of, running afoul of the past of Twitter. Maybe we'll see that again in this case, Gadi.
No way. Elon Musk rule breaking? We'll see when it happens.
I know.
Jake Ward, thanks so much, brother. And turning now to one of the oldest forms of carbon-neutral transportation, boats. Remember how for thousands of years, humans harnessed the wind to sail around? Well, that's all fine and good, right? But what about solar? There's a whole unobstructed amount of sunshine out there on the open water, and one company in Michigan has taken full advantage. WPBN's Mark Cholette explains.
I think engineering is really a tool to create the future.
And that's what Jim Hoteri did for years with cars, pushing boundaries and possibilities. These days, he's doing that by pushing a joystick.
The whole product is controlled with a simple joystick. You can move sideways, forward, backwards, spin on a dime.
This is the Lily Pad solar boat. And if you haven't seen one before, there's a good reason for that.
So these are the first two purely solar-powered boats in Michigan, and nearly the first two in the whole United States.
At 5 miles per hour and nearly silent, they don't necessarily scream for attention. But wherever they do cruise, they certainly are turning heads. by turning the sun into power.
So it's a solar-powered boat that is what we call social first. So the cockpit is designed to really be very much like a dining room table where people can sit around and enjoy conversation. It's nearly silent.
The Holland-based company has been quietly putting these two boats through their paces for the past 2 years, making sure their innovative design holds up. They point out, for users, super simple to operate. No need for gas or oil to be anywhere near the water, and you don't even need a plugged dockside in case of a cloudy day.
We have never plugged either boat in. It's amazing how much power you can get with just the sun.
And if that's not sustainable enough for you, there's more. The aluminum, it's recycled and recyclable. The batteries are repurposed from former electric vehicles. Even the black locust wood for decking and tables screams green.
It's an invasive species here in Michigan. The DNR cuts it down, and we have a partner in Ann Arbor that mills the lumber for us.
Right now, the only two lily pads are on the water in Lake Leelanau and proving to be popular rentals for folks looking to enjoy the lake in a whole new way.
Yeah, people are pretty amazed and excited about it.
It's the age-old joy of gentle, easy cruising, but with a new spin.
And people just love it, you know, when they go out there with a bottle of wine and charcuterie tray and just float around. It's wonderful.
For years, Jim Hoteri pushed envelopes of what was possible to create new possibilities for cars. And these days, he's still doing that, pushing limits by pushing a joystick.
And I've always been drawn to the idea of, you know, we can make the future what we want it to be, and we can make it better.
Sun's out, boats out indeed. Mark Gillette, thanks so much. That does it for us tonight. I'm Gadi Schwartz. We'll see you tomorrow, but until then, stay tuned now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.